Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. It's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us. America's so back, if you haven't realized it now in these last few days, with President Trump taking back the Oval Office back in his rightful home on Pennsylvania Avenue. America is out of the WHO, the World Health Organization, those deceptive folks who led us down path of deception during the COVID-19, or as I call it, the China virus pandemic. The whole flatten the curve, stay at home, mask mandates, all that good stuff. We're finally out of it, rightfully so. Thank you to Donald Trump on that. He's also withdrawn us from the scam of the Paris Climate Accord. That's, that program that we pay hundreds of millions of dollars into for absolutely nothing while China continues to pollute as much as they want. But America has to stifle their pollution, quote, pollution, so China can go ahead and do as they please. And the southern border, for the first time in 4 years, is finally maybe getting under control. President Trump sending an additional 1,500 National Guard, deploying them down to the southern border to get the ball rolling. Governor Greg Abbott, the governor of the great state of Texas, putting out those floatable barriers over in the Rio Grande to try to stifle some of the migrant flow over there. But nonetheless, the border is closed. The days are over. Our guest today is Marc Morano. He's the founder of ClimateDepot.com. Today's episode is going to be dedicated to climate change and all of President Trump's executive orders and what he's going to do to put an end to this woke Green New Deal, green energy scam that we've all been living under for the last 4 years. And folks, as promised, our go-to, we'll call him our climate czar, our climate guru, Marc Morano of ClimateDepot.com. Marc, I want to begin with first, I'm sitting here in sunny Las Vegas, happiest place on earth. Second to Disney World, of course, the grooming facilities of Disney World. And it's like 30 degrees outside. And I've been here only in the summers when it's like 110. You tell me global warming's real and it's changing. Going skiing next week, it's negative 10 there in Colorado. How do I turn on this global warming thing? Because I'm freezing my butt off.
Remember, the United Nations, the UK media, the United Nations scientists, all on record. Snow is a thing of the past. Children won't know what snow is. Our winters are getting so mild they can't even support snow. First of all, then when we had record snow 2010, then suddenly Al Gore and all these, didn't we tell you record snow is a consequence of climate change? It's extreme weather. And we warned you that there would be more extreme weather. But meanwhile, they didn't predict that. They predicted the end of snow. We have now historic storm blasting the south. New Orleans, I want to say it's like 1905, over 100 years since they last saw snowfall rates that they're getting. Washington, D.C., where I live, it was 10 degrees, 8 degrees last night. The inaugural was pushed inside. I still question, by the time noon rolled around, it's probably 22 degrees. It's just in sunny. I still said they could have had some kind of modified outdoor thing. I hate to see them move in. Florida got 5 inches. This has been the coldest January in the DC area. I live in Virginia, that I can remember in decades. I mean, we have had ponds frozen over, snow cover on the ground now for weeks on end, which just usually doesn't happen. We had about a 9-10 inch snowstorm, and then it turned radically cold for weeks, and then we had a couple more snowstorms, and it's still the ground's covered white out here. So it's a very unique winter. But remember, these kind of winters were common in the 70s when there were fears of the man-made global cooling scare. Before fossil fuels caused global warming, fossil fuels caused global cooling. And then, of course, we've warmed up since the 70s. Now, we're still not at the level we were in the 1930s. 75% of all state high-temperature records were set before 1955. And the 1930s reigned supreme as the hottest heat wave, according to Joe Biden's EPA. So, it's just called cycles, and that's the bottom line.
Well, I was just going to ask you that because that was something I was curious about. Back in the day, it's funny, as I departed out of New York, it snowed the day before I got out on time. I just called a buddy of mine who's coming out to Vegas to meet me out here. And I called him on FaceTime, and he's like, got snow in the background. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia. I said, John, where are you? I go, I didn't know you were going to New York. He goes, no, I'm not in New York. He works for Delta Airlines. And he's sitting out there on the tarmac, and there's snow everywhere. I'm going, hold on. you're in Atlanta. What's going on? He goes, you can't imagine. There's snow everywhere. There's ice everywhere. And I'm going, you live in Atlanta, Georgia. You're not in New York. What's going on? But it's unbelievable that this is happening. But the question I have for you is, maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, in that time frame area, I remember very well in New York, we were getting these massive snowstorms where we would get 3, 4, 5 feet of snow. Why is it that we don't get those anymore? What is the changing cycle? What inhibits that, and what prevents that from happening, where you're getting now only in the last maybe 2 years, I can only remember 5 years or so, maybe a foot of snow in New York.
Yeah, it's weather cycles, everything from the polar vortex, the way the jet stream works, the way the tropics work, and weather storms. Here in Washington, D.C., our big snowstorms where we get 1 to 2 feet usually come from the south and from the ocean, and they come off the coast. We'll get other storms that come, typically from west to east. In places like New York, that's going to be affected. It depends on where in New York. Obviously, Buffalo and anything near Great Lakes is going to be lake effect, which is its own sort of microclimates. But basically, you go through cycles. And when I was a kid, I could, off the top of my head, we had a blizzard of 79 in Washington, 2 feet. In 1983, we had another 2-foot snowstorm. We had an 87, like a 1.5-foot snowstorm. And then we had a 93 15-inch snowstorm in March of 93. And then we had the big blizzard of 96, which was massive, 2.5 feet plus another 10-inch storm plus another 8-inch storm. And then we had a 2002 or 2003 2-foot storm. We had a 2009. I'm just giving you these dates to show you how this is my own personal experience. I had a weather kit. I had a little, kept logs and measuring all the snow. 2009 and then 2015 was our last blizzard we had here, and that was like 30 inches of snow. And that was, so you see, that was 2015, I just said. So that was 10 years ago. So we're overdue for a 1 to 2 foot. So although the one we just had was like 10 inches, so it was close to a foot, but it wasn't a blizzard. So we're overdue. There's really no rhyme or reason looking at it long term. It's just weather happens. And this is what happens. You go through snow droughts, and then in 2009, we had a December 2-foot snowstorm. And then we had a February back-to-back two separate 2-foot snowstorms. So within like 2.5 months, we had 3 major blizzards in the Washington, D.C. area. So who knows long term? You can always come up with an explanation. Short term, will this happen because the high pressure system and then the polar vortex? But when you're looking at it, I just did it my lifetime rating. Now, you go back further, you can go back hundreds of years, and of course the records get a little less. But there were snowstorms Thomas Jefferson measured that said there were 3 feet of snow out in Virginia and the Virginia suburbs, or I guess it wouldn't be suburbs, Monticello, hours away from DC, but still. So it's hard to explain that in terms of these snowstorms, because they are a micro. When I say they're not a nationwide, like, there's a snow. Generally, it's not. There's a snowstorm hitting. It'll pass through, but generally these are the big ones are areas that are focused in regions, in smaller regions. Unlike, say, a drought where you can have the entire Southwest in a drought, or where you can have, but it's similar to the way a hurricane hits. I mean, who knows what nature throws at you to make a hurricane hit Florida, make a landfall versus veer off the coast. I mean, there's no, you can come up with a million, there's a lot of theories and everything else, but no one really knows why a hurricane hits and doesn't hit. Now, other people believe the government's trying to manipulate them, and there's probably ways that they could in the future. A lot of different ways to try to steer. The government openly talks about steering the track of hurricanes. But having said that, the simplest explanation is weather happens. It's just, there's no other explanation, and there's no rhyme or reason. And there's certainly no signal. There's a signal in the sense that in the 70s, we had colder, snowy weather. In the 50s, we had colder. But in the 30s, we had, much warmer weather. It's all cycles. And you can go back, and there's someone actually did analysis back to like 1850 with all of that, global cooling, global warming. So, at any rate, I don't know specifically the history of New York City, but, you can look at Central Park records, and it's, again, it just, things happen. And by the way, I'm very excited this year, NFL season, a lot of playoff games. Most recently was the Philadelphia. We've had Buffalo games. And I love all this snow NFL games. They're great throwbacks. I can't stand the dome stadiums.
Yeah, it kind of takes the authenticity. I'll never forget watching back one of the biggest rivalries in football used to be the Packers and the and the Vikings, and watching them get out there in Lambeau Field. The wind is blowing. I'm a Giants fan, so I watched many of games of our kickers missing kicks in Lambeau Field with snow on the ground.
The Purple People Eaters, the Vikings, and then you had the Detroit Lions.
Yep.
They stripped the soul of their franchises when they did that, when they put in domes. Now, maybe I'd be open to retractable domes or something. You'd think they would do something like that to at least get the elements as much as possible and have the option, but it just took away the character. It's still people like teams like Chicago, Buffalo, New England. It's a toughness of character that's true home field advantage and not playing in a 70-degree cushy dome stadium in the middle of winter.
And as Marxist as New York is and Democrat as it is, Buffalo Bills, who happen to be a good team as of late, are getting a stadium with no retractable roof up in Buffalo, New York. So hats off to whoever did. I don't think it was Governor Hochul. I think it was Governor Cuomo who originally signed the deal with them to build that stadium. But you're right. It takes the fun out of the game. I want to turn to something you had mentioned, back to tracking weather into the 1800s, because it's where I was going next. And the weather and lack thereof weather happening in California right now, and has been happening now for the last, a few hundred years, at least, on the record books. California obviously going through a dry period right now. Now, we can argue, it's not really an argument because it's the truth, of Gavin Newsom not being able to put water in his fire hydrants and forest fire management, all that good stuff. But I want to look at it from the weather aspect of it, right? If you go back and you look at some of the numbers from the early to late 1800s to the early 1990s, they had periods that were drier than they are right now for longer periods of time. So if global warming is such a thing and it's progressively getting worse and you can't undo global warming, it only gets worse, it doesn't get better, then why is it that we have periods that are in the 1920s to 1930s in California where it's longer droughts, worse droughts than we're in right now, which is probably like a 10-year drought going on in California, which shouldn't be a drought, by the way, based on them being the most accessible state to water, having the largest body of water sitting right off their coast. Trump often says liquid gold is right under our feet. They have liquid gold like sitting right in their backyards. So what's going on there? 250 miles to the west of me right now is Malibu, California, where the California wildfires are still burning. We now have ones in San Diego as well. What's going on there? Why can't they ever get it together, these people?
Well, first of all, it was the San Jose Mercury News did a big report years ago. The droughts in California centuries ago were much, much worse than anything they've experienced in recent decades. I mean, I'm talking about California is historically a drought-prone state, regardless of anything. So we know that going in. And then if you look at the most recent data, they had record precipitation the last couple of years. Now, it does two things in regard to wildfires. A, it would theoretically lower the risk if everything's moist and there's less tinder. But on the other hand, all of that rain probably helped in stimulate the growth of the brush that they have there.
Right.
And in California, this is the simplest explanation. In fact, there was a extreme weather expert, Dr. Roger Pilkey Jr., University of Colorado. It's not climate change. The underlying problem here is policy, not climate. And that's the bottom line. We had the U.S. Geological Survey top scientists come out and say L.A. wildfires are not climate change, not by any stretch of the imagination, that this is absolutely no bearing on it. If you look at charts of wildfires in the U.S. and globally, they are down like 80% in the last 100 years. The one thing we've gotten good at is dealing with fire, putting out fires. Not fire suppression necessarily, because that's suppression implies there's a preventative thing, but in terms of responding. So if you look at wildfires, first of all, as a climate metric, it's one of the worst ones. You have hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, wildfires, droughts. First of all, the UN says on every single one of those 30, 50, 100 years, even the UN says there's no trend or declining trends. There's no there. Extreme weather's not getting worse. They can say, well, in Southwest California, since 1998, the droughts have been record. If this were to, they can cherry pick any region. But if you look at it as a globe, remember, I just gave you the whole thing about snowstorms and how it affects. It's all different. So you have to look at, if you're going to look at it globally, you start realizing, hey, weather is just shifting around and there's really no trend, no extreme weather trends at all. Anyway, having said that, wildfires are one of the worst climate metrics because A, they deal with forestry, land use, property development, water, diversification, water diversion, land use, and fire response, politics, investment, rapid response, building codes. There are so many layers of man-made political, governmental, organizational, strategic planning, emergency preparedness that to sit there and blame a fire on climate change. Let me give you the number one reason. Well, two reasons. Homeless people starting fire, and that's what the U.S. Geological Survey said. And there was a study in 2021, almost 100% of all wildfires are caused by humans by lighting them. It's not even like, oh, it's lightning that hit.
Right.
It's either faulty power line or someone intentionally arsonist or accidentally starting it. Having said all other thing I just said, we now know that it took a minimum of 45 minutes for the LA firefighters to respond to the initial fire.
Right.
45 minutes, which is not supposed to happen. I don't know the exact standard, but if they had been there in 10 or 15, there would be probably no LA wildfires. And of course, then it gets into the politics of, the whole the DEI hires and the woke and the idea that they were almost $1 million a year job for people to be in charge of making sure diversity, and they weren't actually there doing rapid response. It's a complete eye off the ball. They wouldn't allow. I love the meme that shows California runs out of water, and there's a picture of like the Pacific Ocean next to LA, and like if only California could figure out a source for water. Having said that, Israel, which is a desert, has now figured out desalination plants, and they can use that water because apparently you don't want to spray seawater, Pacific Ocean water, on a property and houses and shrubs because it's very corrosive to the landscape and would cause sorts of problems. But they can desalinate. Would it cost money? Yes. Would you need plants? Yes. Would those plants possibly affect some smelt or some other snail darter or something? Who knows? Right. So you have Gavin Newsom bragging about the endangered species savings. You have Gavin Newsom bragging about blowing up dams, which used to divert water and make water, retain water. The largest dam removal projects in U.S. history, they were just bragging about a couple years ago in California. It's a complete Garden of Eden syndrome where they want to return California to prehistoric, pre-civilization state, this Garden of Eden idea in their heads, and they're willing to cost humans whatever it takes. And that's where we are right now. So California, this is a truly man-made disaster from beginning to end, both at the state and local level. They didn't respond. They didn't do any preparedness, and they ran out of water. They had other priorities. This is what happens for anyone to come by and say climate change, global warming ate my homework, or climate change does this. Is just, it's bonkers. And even many of the leftists aren't even, the people who would usually scream it aren't even buying it. There's a lot of people just saying, we got to stop this nonsense. Clearly, this is a failure of public policy, preparation, priorities. One last point. I mentioned Israel with the desalination. In Japan, where they have wildfire-prone areas, they have little faucets. You can watch this. There's an article about 4 years ago, I think it was the Japan Times, and there's a video. They pop up out of the ground. Each house has its own little water spray, and it goes off and it sprays all of the houses almost instantly at any sign of fire, smoke, or heat detection. That's the kind of thing. Gavin Newsom, remember, he's bragged that California has more billionaires than anyone other state in the union. If this state, with all of its wealth, opulence, Hollywood, billionaires, political power, had invested in that and the fire-prone areas where each house, you could do it. They have the money, they have the means, they have the technology, they have the budgets, and they don't prioritize it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I want to take a quick break here. We're talking with Marc Morano of ClimateDepot.com. When we come back, I want to continue this conversation about California and the mismanagement and the focus point, what it should be and what it's not, and what it currently is. I also want to take up the new Trump administration, the Paris Climate Accords, the WHO. Davos elites are losing their damn minds. We're coming right back with Marc Morano of ClimateDepot.com. Stay with us.
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support, and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented MyPillow. MyPillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all three.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King My Pillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic My Pillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
Folks, we're back with Marc Morano. ClimateDepot.com is the website. Like I said, Marc's our climate czar. Oh, man. That's the fellow that if you're watching us on video right now
that's a lot of barking.
and you hear the dog barking, that's it. That's the culprit right there. So, as I said, Marc Morano, our climate czar, our climate guru. We don't turn to Bill Nye, the not-so-science guy.
But he's a Medal of Freedom winner from the Biden administration. The guy who wanted to jail climate skeptics that I interviewed exclusively in 2016 in Central Park. He's open to the idea of jailing climate skeptics because they affected his way of life and they're fighting, they're blocking climate action. He wins the Congressional Medal of Freedom from Joe Biden, gets it pinned on him.
Oh boy, it's a new administration though, Marc, and far more optimistic. We're going to have to introduce you to President Trump if you haven't met him yet, because I think you could provide some good insight, and I think he'd probably love you. Maybe a blessing in disguise for you. It may not be. Who knows? But you'd mentioned something that it's mind-blowing to me as I sit in the middle of a desert right now, the desalinization of water from the ocean. And you'd mentioned the California elites, not wanting to put salt water on wildfires because it could damage the homes and corrosion, this and that. But Marc, could it get any worse than it is right now with people's homes completely level to the floor? I'm not saying have water pumps set up in the ocean to spray your plants and water your gardens, but in a situation like this, I mean, literally urine would be better than what we have right now. That's how bad it is. Letting your dog go urinate on these wildfires, but because you turn the spigot on the fire hydrants, almost said sewer, and nothing comes out. So it's either we put this salt water that may damage your grass and may kill your grass on it. We spend billions of dollars to build desalinization plants, which there'll probably be some sort of government corruption in it. Gavin Newsom will make out like a wet bandit.
Yeah, it's going to be something. Right.
It's so mind blowing to me, these people, how they haven't figured out a way to take water out of the ocean. And by the way, Marc, I got a little secret. The water that comes out of the ocean is free.
Well, I'm sure they would find some fish or some marine mammal, something that they would say, we can't do this. It's impact. We need
mermaids. We need
14 years of environmental study before we can improve this. That's the kind of nonsense that would happen in California. Now, even if they just got straight salt water, I don't think they have the infrastructure set up to pump it in. You could theoretically, I guess, get a fire truck. I'm not even sure a fire truck could take in Pacific seawater because it would probably destroy the truck eventually, just the corrosion of the salt water alone. So I don't really know, even short term, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure how they would do it in any effective way that would be able to, they couldn't build, they would need some kind of what's a pipeline almost. And that would require more environmental permit study. And, who knows, by 2040, they might have the first blueprint for that available. Who knows?
Well, the good news is President Trump on all new projects in America right now, if you're spending X amount of money, especially if it regards the environment, he's waiving the wait time on all, like you said, these permits, which eat up so much time. You apply for something, you wait 4 years for a permit, and boom, Trump's out of office. Now you got a Marxist Dem back in office who's putting you right back to square one, and you go back and forth on the 4 years. But you can't mean to tell me we put a man on the moon. Some people say we never did. I'm not going to dispute that. I'm going to listen to the government and say we put a man on the moon, okay? You can't tell me Elon Musk lands a rocket on its tail side and reuses these rockets, and we can't find a damn pump. You can go down to Harbor Freight, Marc, the cheapest hardware store around, and put a pump in the water in your pool and drain your pool. You can't tell me with the smartest people on this planet, or Americans, that we can't find a way to run a temporary pump. We spend billions of dollars on the dumbest stuff, on the dumbest studies, on DEI, on anything. We go down the list of the dumb things we spend money on. You can't mean to tell me that we can't put together a damn contraption, Marc. Go get a homeless guy to take a garden hose, do the old siphon roll, suck the water through and get it flowing. I mean, it's so simple to me. Why can't we just get things like this done? Why is there so much red tape that just blocks us from doing the right thing?
Well, we literally have that kind of paralysis in America now. It's at the federal level, state level, the local level. Okay. The answer to your question on that, it goes back to George H.W. Bush, 1992. He flies down to the Rio Earth Summit. He signs the Earth Summit Sustainable Development Treaty. We come back on a voice vote that year. The United States Senate approved the Rio Earth Summit Treaty, which then brought sustainable development into America encoded. And Nancy Pelosi gave a big speech on the House floor praising it. And it does it in a way that goes to all the local, state, and local levels. You get like these templates that are derivative of the United Nations, and everything comes down to the lens in which you view all economic development, all growth, all projects has to be a sustainable environmental way. Some places have taken it further than others. Obviously, California, Oregon, Washington State would be examples of that. And so anything you do has to be those environmental impact studies, has to look at it. There's also, as a conjunction of that in recent years, and this is big in California, the natural rights movement where personhood status, they're trying to get personhood status to a lake, to a tree, to natural objects in nature where you just can't go. And a forest service or logging company can't go cut trees and use it for wood. You can't go build a dam because these are now, environmentalists are going to sue on behalf of the natural body of water or tree or whatever it is. And this is where people are making a lot of money. And this is where you also have natural asset companies where Wall Street is trading on these now, where there's like a value. It's like there are so many layers. And the last thing they're going to worry about is, we need to get something done and this will benefit humanity. That's kind of like, no, humans are evil. There's too many. We have the voluntary human extinction movement. That's what I'm saying. This is perhaps Garden of Eden syndrome isn't good because it makes it sound like they're biblically based and they want to return to this, biblical nirvana. It's not. It's an ideology where they just think man should be separated from nature and man's needs are way down the list and we need to just have a pristine environment. And by the way, have you been to California lately? Have you been to LA? Have you been to San Francisco? You think they have a good environment? Is human defecation and urination in the street and open drug use and discarded needles, is that a clean environment?
Yeah, they don't mention that. They don't show that on camera. You think of like some of the things the government's done, and it's not just the government, it's private sector selling it to the government because everyone makes a dollar on everything. But something, as I'm sitting here drinking an iced coffee, looking at a straw that's noticeably not made of plastic, and it's.
By the way, we didn't vote on that paper straw. That's one of those things like the EV mandate. They were just thrown at us by the unelected bureaucratic state. No, but you look at certain things. I mean, Mark, why are boats not made of cardboard? Well, obviously because it absorbs the water, and after about 5 minutes, it's the same reason straws should not be made of paper. And yet we have a government. There was probably a government study done on it that cost billions of dollars, and somebody made out like a bandit, as usually happens in things like this. The amount of money. Do you have any idea on the amount of money that is spent, we'll say yearly, over the last decade on just stupid environmental studies that have gone nowhere, have just been a waste of our time? I mean, it's got to be in the trillions of dollars, right? Yes. Well, it depends on how you. There's direct budget items like that, but there's also just the economic cost of delaying all of these things. I mean, if you just look at it, what's weird about this is the flip side is true, because if you look at offshore wind, what is the Biden administration doing in the final days? They're pumping in money to offshore wind, despite the fact that we have unprecedented whale mortality deaths, where federal scientists are now admitting that this is the only variable that's changed in recent years. It's not commercial fishing. It's not fossil fuel projects. Guess what it is? Offshore wind. Massive whale mortalities. I think at one point, they had 13 dead whales in less than 30 days off the New Jersey, New York, Long Island, Rhode Island, all those coastlines. It was unbelievable. It's still going on. They've waived. You want to talk about how they can expedite the process of all the bureaucracy? They get immediate waiving of all the endangered species regulations or a leniency for these offshore wind because it's politically protected. No fossil fuel project would ever get these waivers. They actually have more legal takings of endangered whale species than there are known to exist in the wild for offshore wind. So they're allowed to wipe out what's left of endangered whale species in the Atlantic coast because they need to get this offshore wind, which, by the way, solar and wind combined are producing less than 5% of our energy, less than 15% of our electricity combined. So it's not even producing the energy. It's a giant wind. So people understand, it's the height of the height of the Eiffel Tower. The average offshore wind turbine, and the blades are the length of a football field, 100 yards plus.
Wow,
that's the monstrosity you're putting out there. It takes concrete. Tons of concrete, steel, non-recyclable plastic. It takes oil to run them. I mean, there is nothing green or sustainable about offshore wind. And the fact that they don't produce energy worth shit is just icing on the cake.
You know, I'm all for if you could make something more sustainable. I'm all for if you can eliminate ozone pollution. I'm all for it, right? But the hypocrisy of it all. They're not using electric trucks, Mark, to go ahead and deliver those football field long blades. They're not using electric drills to go ahead and break down to the bedrock to pour a cement mixer. The cement mixer they're using, it's not running on AA batteries, Mark. I hate to break it to you. And even if it were, those AA batteries are made in a facility that's run on fossil fuels. Okay. And when you dispose of those batteries, they are supposed to be disposed of the right way. And when they're disposed of, they're not being disposed of with reusable electricity. It's used on fossil fuels. So I'm all for if you can make the world a more sustainable place. I don't think anyone's opposed to that, right? But don't do it at the expense of our own. If someone wants to go out in the private sector and put together a study and bring it to the government and say, this is what we can do, maybe the government should pay them a few dollars. But to be spending trillions of dollars a year to do these stupid studies that are so unnecessary, you and I often talk about the whole notion of net zero for airlines. It's virtually impossible. Why are you wasting our time with this absolute stupidity? There's not enough trees you can plant in a day that would offset the carbon that one airplane that is flown across the earth for one day would offset. It's just common sense, yet they try to force it down our throat. So like I said, I'm all for more sustainability. I'm all for figuring out. Now they've even figured out these straws, Mark. Now they're using like avocado shells. Excellent. If you can get rid of plastic, I'm all for it. But give me the option if I want to go to the store and buy plastic. Give me the option if I want to go to the store and buy avocado skins.
I mean, the absurdity is you go in a grocery store, your meat's wrapped in plastic, your milk, every possible thing.
Which is
but then you go and they ban plastic bags, so you have to use a paper bag that rips on your way out. That's just a way to punish people. That's all that is. It has nothing to do with any reality.
It makes absolutely not. You mentioned plastic on the meat. What's underneath that? Something that's not biodegradable. Styrofoam.
Styrofoam. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the paper bags in New York now. The way around that is you have to pay for a bag now. If you want a bag, you have to go to the store and pay 25 cents. Whoa, you've really got us. I mean, do they really think they're saving the world? One plastic bag at a time. The stupidity mark has come to a new high that it's like it seems like we're almost watching Donald Trump on the stage the other day with the Village People dancing. I thought was a new. It was like this new time, new millennium. Yet time and time again, these leftists, these Marxists, find a way to do something that it blows my mind, and my mind's already been blown before.
Yeah, it's important to point this out, like the shift that's happening here. You have NFL players doing the Trump dance at end zone celebration. You have all over social media. You have a transformed Donald Trump who, maybe a couple assassination attempts, getting shot, maybe getting threatened with jail. Maybe that has an impact on you. I don't know. But I feel like he's grown up the worst parts of his personality. I say this as a Trump fan, but he had, I always said I could understand why people couldn't stand him in the sense that he, he could rub people the wrong way. But I always liked him. I was with him.
If you're a beta man, I understand.
What's that?
If you're a beta male, looking on the outside in, I can understand. You got this alpha male running around doing whatever he wants to do. I can understand why you wouldn't like him.
But also they just felt so insulted. So you had this whole never Trump class of people grow up. Well, what's fascinating now is he is just laser focused. He doesn't have, like, if you think of Trump 1.0, what happened Inauguration Day in 2017? There had a big argument over crowd size. I just remember at the time being like, what? I just didn't get it. Like he got himself too many distractions. And because of that, I think he was less effective. This time around, he just seems so focused. I said this that I meant it. It almost brings tears to my eyes now. when I like his inaugural speech that he gave after the swearing in, it was just blown away. I mean, when you consider how far and close we were to going the World Economic Forum Great Reset way, where free speech was going to be crushed, and the idea that critical race and transgenderism and was just taking over America, being imposed upon us, I should say. It wasn't, and we didn't have any choice. And of course, the gas-powered cars, and they're going after meat. It was just incredible. The intentional collapse of energy, rationing, food collapse, and rationing, going after meat and lab-grown meat, and then of course the EV and limits, restrictions on our movement. I mean, it was just not the America anyone recognized. He comes in. You have every major bank, Bank of America, JP Morgan, now the Federal Reserve. You even have BlackRock pull out of the UN banking alliance on climate. I mean, it's a complete, utter collapse. Yeah. Donald Trump is similar to what happened. Think of the 1970s, think of the 1980s. The 1980s were considered iconic vis-a-vis almost the 1950s because of what Ronald Reagan ushered in. Now, you can't say Reagan did it, but Reagan also benefited. It's kind of like that culture pushed him. America changed significantly from the gas lines and the austerity and Jimmy Carter and the weakness to an America of just reigning supreme. You could argue it was great again in the 1980s. And this time, I feel like we're about to go through the same thing. We're seeing it. Mark Zuckerberg, if you listen to his speech about his free speech commitment, my God, put him up there with Thomas Paine. If you just listen to the words, I was in awe of Mark Zuckerberg. I love the guy. Now, I don't know how sincere he was or whether he's just, but the point is, you can't take those words back. Words are powerful. He said it, and he was awesome. I mean, he just was going through about the criticism, the fact check, and people have a right to speak, and disinformation. You can't have the government censor. It was incredible. Yeah. We are now in a sea change where I think our culture is going to change. Hollywood's going to change. Disney's going to change. I love the Gulf of America. Here's a tip. Someone needs to come up with stickers for everyone who has globes and maps. They can get, instead of to tape over Gulf of Mexico, you can put in Gulf of America, and you can make money selling these stickers for every household that has a globe with kids or classrooms. But anyway, it's just that Mount McKinley as well. Let's take a Washington Redskins name back at this point in that the Indian logo, which was honored by the Indian community, was so proud of their helmets. But anyway, having said all that, it's truly in my lifetime, I believe, and this exceeds, and I'm very clear about this, exceeds the impact of Ronald Reagan. This is Donald Trump's presidency, maybe the most consequential presidency of our lifetime, exceeding Ronald Reagan. And I mean that. And I mean that on cultural, economic, government size and scope, and foreign policy. And it's that impressive of what he represents. And I think he needed to go through everything he needed. He needed to have happened what happened, the assassination attempts and the jailing threats and the persecution of everyone around him and coming after him and the FBI raids and et cetera. This has been this is one of the greatest potential moments in American history right now that we're living through.
I'm not sure anyone needs that. I mean, the guy, almost lost his life and all that.
Well, I you know what I'm saying. I
understand that.
I'm just saying it built him up. I'm not arguing that was a good thing.
Right. No, it's truly remarkable. And if Donald Trump doesn't look up to anybody, and he doesn't look down on anybody. But if there's one person who he's looked up to in his life, most recently, and probably over the course of his political career, or whether you want to span it back to 2000, it was Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan, for some people, was the greatest president of all time. Donald Trump is certainly the greatest president of my lifetime, and will probably be the greatest president in the history of this country when he's done with this 4-year term. Just based on some of the things he's done this first week in office. I want to take one more quick break here. And when we return, I want to talk about some of those things he's done. The World Economic Forum, the Davos elites. You're going to be over there next year seeing maybe for climate summits. So I want to take all that up on the other side of this quick break and all the great work he's done in just a week. Not even a week. It's 4 days. I mean, unbelievable. Coming right back. Marc Morano, the climate guru. Stay with us.
This past year has been one of the hardest in MyPillow's history. It's because of you that we're making it through. My employees and I want to thank you for your continued support by extending our wholesale prices on classic MyPillows. Get standard classic MyPillows only $14.98. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.98. But it gets even better. Upgrade to a queen size MyPillow for just $18.98. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows $29.98 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of these wholesale prices, including my standard size MyPillow, originally $49.98, now only $14.98. Queens $18.98, Kings only $1 more. Not only that, order $75 or more, ship absolutely free. From all of us here at MyPillow, thanks America!
Folks, we're back with Marc Morano, climatedepot.com, the climate guru. It's my new name for Marc. We like to have him here as often as we can on this show to give us all the truth and the hard facts, the facts that the Democrats and the Marxist leftists can't seem to swallow. Marc, there's some other things they're not going to be able to swallow over the next 4 years, and particularly this first week of President Trump in office. Let's start with the World Economic Forum going into a total meltdown, basically admitting Donald Trump won and we're done.
Yes, the latest reports, which I'm just getting this morning from the World Economic Forum meeting, it's called the WEF 25th, I guess it's 25 consecutive years, in Davos. Are you ready for this? I'm going to save the best for last. Reports are showing half-empty hallways, German chancellor addressing a sparse audience, and this is the key one. This is the most fun. Luxury call girl business down 60% compared to last year. That means not only is the crowd size down, but their libido is down, which is great because they are demoralized. Sorry about that.
Is Bill Clinton not there?
And there's all these video reports coming out. You can see the empty hall. And what's also amazing is they've had one panel at least this morning where they're talking about how Trump has basically been resurrected and done something no other politician. They're sort of in awe of Trump. I think their greatest regret is not winning him over to the dark side. That's what it sounds like. They're lamenting that he's on the wrong side. But Trump's election was the greatest rejection of this whole World Economic Forum, Great Reset development. In other words, the WEF will have no one there and will be happy, or it's not the Great Reset, it's the Great Reject. That's what America 2024 voted for. And we are seeing the global, I guess, what's the word I'm looking, not tailcoats, what's the coattails of this rejection. We're seeing the German government collapse due to economic problems. We're seeing Macron facing problems. We're seeing the bye-bye of Justin Trudeau. Yep. We're seeing England have all sorts of problems. They're saying if they go through with this, they're expecting absolute riots in the street because of the green agenda in England. We have the halt of the Green New Deal in Europe, and they had elections last summer, which were a harbinger of things to come in the U.S., rejecting their green mandates. You have the UN Climate Summit, which I went to in Baku, Azerbaijan, 23 hours of flying next to Russia and bordering Iran and Russia. And Azerbaijan. They were similar to what we're finding at this World Economic Forum. Low attendance, no major world leaders spoke, no energy. The conference was bickering and fighting. And the Argentinian delegation led by Malou pulled out their entire delegation. We are looking at the potential of a Clexit, climate exit from the UN climate treaty, similar to Brexit, of Argentina, of Poland, of Hungary, of Czech Republic, these Eastern Bloc nations. And if Bolsonaro gets back in Brazil, he would join it. Trump, by pulling out of the Paris Agreement again, is we are back on track. This is so different from where it was 8 years ago in 2017, because then it was just signed, the UN Paris. Everyone's like, oh, Trump is a kidney stone, we'll pass it. And in large thing, they were able to, because then Biden came in. But the difference now is the entire net zero climate agenda has been exposed raw. And a lot of that is because of the Ukraine war and the Nord Stream pipeline blowing up, and Europe realizing firsthand, maybe we shouldn't have been talking about blowing up our fracking wells. Maybe we shouldn't have got all the fossil fuels, because now they're relying on Russian energy, Middle Eastern energy. They were begging, they're going to be relying on US natural gas exports. It was a national security threat. Europe is rebelling from all of that. Everyone knows it's a fraud and a scam, offshore wind, all of these things that need subsidies, all this. If solar and wind are so great, why do you have to ban the competition? Why are they regulating fossil fuels? If gas-powered cars are if EVs are so great, why do you have to ban their competition? It's like Muhammad Ali showing up in the ring in the 1970s. I'm here to fight Joe Frazier, but I'm the greatest of all time. I'm banning Joe Frazier from the ring because I don't need to fight him. I'm the greatest. I don't need to have a fight to prove. That's what they do with all this green energy and EVs. They claim that they're superior, but yet they know they're not because they ban the competition. So this is a sea change that we're witnessing. And that's why I said most consequential presidency of our lifetimes.
Before we turn to the Paris Climate Accord, we spoke before the show. You had mentioned President Trump has to do one more thing with that. Before we turn to that, I want to get to something else because you had mentioned electric vehicles, and obviously it's no secret Elon Musk and Donald Trump are like this. They're best friends now.
At the moment, I don't predict that. I think within 6 months, it's hard for Elon Musk. Is probably very hard for him to treat someone like an equal, number one. And you saw the arrogance come out on the visa program where he's like, if you effing cross me on this, I will you. I mean, it's like, wow, ego much? Anyway, sorry.
Settle down, oligarch. But, the thing that I thought was so interesting was going to see how President Trump reacted, being that these are their friends, with the electric vehicle mandates now and gravy train. Now, Elon Musk said he doesn't care if President Trump gets rid of them because he doesn't really get them anyway. They give him the Chevy and they give him all these other people in California can't stand Elon Musk.
Benefits from the whole government push of EVs and suppression of gas powered. Yeah.
But one of President Trump's executive orders on his first day in office was, quote, all agencies shall immediately pause the disbursement of funds from programs created by the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. The order specifically calls for the halt of funding for EV charging stations made available through the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, NEVI formula program, and the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure, CFI grant programs. So it's sort of interesting to see the pushback on Elon Musk, that he's given them right off the bat. I know we're tight on time here, so I want to turn to the Paris Climate Accords. You had mentioned before the show, it's nice that he withdrew, but now what does President Trump now have to do? Where does he need to take the Paris Climate Accords?
Yes, the problem is he's basically done what he did 8 years ago, pulled us out, put a signal of the intent. Great. But he also did one step further this time, and then I'll get to what he needs to do. He did pull us out of the economic and the funding frameworks for all this, climate slush funds and the economic and paying and distributing all this money, which is a great step. He did not do that last time. But here's the problem. The next president, if it's President Gavin Newsom, and who knows, if we have another pandemic and Trump falls for it like he did last time, and he was clearly duped. We know this because Deborah Birx, the COVID coordinator and Anthony Fauci, she wrote a book bragging about how they duped Donald Trump into 10 days to flatten the curve, which halted his entire presidency and killed his reelection, basically, because it created the whole COVID theater of fear. What he needs to do this time around with the Paris Agreement, he needs to submit the Paris Agreement to the United States Senate as a treaty. There is no way it will be ratified. It will be rejected. The Kyoto Protocol, similar, was just a sense of the Senate, and it was lost like 95 to nothing. Senators won't go on record. The same way Obama's cap and trade. Even senators like Al Franken of Minnesota wouldn't vote for it. Like 8 Democrats came out. They won't vote for stuff that means that they're doomed in their home districts. So if Donald Trump submits the UN Paris Agreement for a treaty, it gets rejected by the Senate, that would then, depending on which lawyer you're talking to, but most likely make it very difficult, would kick us out of this UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which again began in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit under George H.W. Bush. He wanted to pair green. Republicans love the environment too, so we'll go sign on to the UN treaty. Hey, the Earth Summit, we care. He lost to Bill Clinton. I urged everyone I knew in 1992 to vote for Ross Perot. I hated the Bush family back then so much. Anyway, but I did. I actually voted for Andre Maru, a used car salesman, the Libertarian candidate who ran. In 96, I voted for probably Howard Phillips for president, U.S. taxpayer. 2000, I may have voted for Pat Buchanan. In 2004, I did vote for George W. Bush only because I couldn't stand John Kerry, and that was the only. I regret that vote. Anyway,
he was the original climate guru, by the way.
What's that?
John Kerry.
Who was?
John Kerry was the original climate guru.
Yes. So anyway, make a long story short, if Trump can get this rejected and go after the actual legal basis, and remember, the Republican Senate in 1992 did a voice vote ratify that Republican Senate, but the Senate, U.S. Senate, 1992 did a voice vote ratifying the Earth Summit Treaty. So because of that, it became, and the Obama administration, when they signed the UN Paris, said, oh, well, this is just an extension of that already existing thing. And that could argue, that was in the New York Times, and they were trying to argue that, and no one ever challenged it. But if he submits this to the Senate and it's rejected, theoretically, and of course, from some of the legal experts I've talked to, and many people agree with this, of course, it all depends on how it be interpreted by courts in the end. But basically, the next president, if it's a Gavin Newsom or et cetera, can't just put us back in. They're going to have some kind of a treaty, treat these summits, these UN pacts as a treaty, which is what they should be, because they affect every aspect of our life, from our energy to our food, to our freedom of movement, to even our freedom of speech. You have the UN collaborating with Google to suppress searches so that nothing counters what the UN narrative is on climate.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. As I said, Mark, I know we're short on time here. I appreciate you joining us. But as we're on here, a news wire just came through. Indian officials are preparing to repatriate roughly 18,000 Indian migrants who may have overstayed their visa or are living illegally in America. The Trump administration, hard at work. It hasn't even been a week. Yes. So much is getting done. Mark, come back soon. I'm sure there's plenty to talk about. Well, I'm not sure. There's definitely plenty to talk about.
There's going to be a lot.
We're going to have some fun over the next 4 years, Mark. Thanks so much. The website from Marc Morano is climatedepot.com, folks. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks a lot, John. Okay, appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us today. Please be sure to join us back here tomorrow for the Great America Show, where our quest for truth, justice, and the American way continues. We'll see you back here tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, may God bless you, may God bless America, and may God bless the great Blue Dobbs.